Hello, and welcome to another episode of LeftOut, your audio distribution for the popular revolution. I'm Nova, your host.
And I'm Michael, your co-host.
Um,
and we'll be we'll be going over the women's marches like we promised in last week's show. Was it a week? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's basically exactly a week.
It could be. Not too important whether it is or not. So we'll be going over the women's march, Trump's actions in the last, since he's been inaugurated, really, and how that is essentially a fascist coup. We'll get into that later.
Yeah,
obviously, with the refugee crisis and how that's playing out across America and across the globe, even. A
little preview on that part. Not good.
No, not something that we look forward to talking about, because it is quite distressing, and it's certainly something that, as a leftist, it's kind of natural to oppose, but it's good to talk about that and really outline what's so wrong about it all, which...
get everybody on the same page.
Yeah. Okay, so the women's marches, few statistics that we had here before. So the march drew worldwide participation of 4.8 million people. At least 408 marches were planned in the US alone, and 168 in 81 other countries.
So 7 continents, including Antarctica.
Exactly.
Where there was a march of the penguins.
So clearly there is worldwide opposition to Trump. Look, if we look at it from a real standpoint, a lot of this was liberal bourgeois feminism. That didn't really, it wasn't revolutionary by any stretch of the imagination. It was quite a one-issue protest, but I think one of the major positives that, as a leftist, as a revolutionary leftist, is that it shows that we can immobilize on a massive and worldwide scale in a coordinated way that can cause a lot of harm.
It's deeply symbolic.
These technologies that we have, in 81 countries, it's incredible. Something I think it also outlines. It's a funny way to look at it, I think, but it also outlines the extent of the American empire. I mean,
definitely
sexist and misogynistic world leaders before, and none of them have garnered the opposition that Trump has. And not to say that Trump is he's not unprecedented. Some of his unprofessionalism and the way he speaks and his mannerisms, etc., it's quite different. But his stands on women, etc., aren't unprecedented. And I think the fact that this has garnered so much opposition also suggests the extent of the American empire at this stage, and how important.
Well, and also I think too, it gets through to some of our liberal friends who haven't quite caught on to what we're talking about, the idea of international solidarity. You know, it's not just one person's or one country's issue, you know, and so, you know, I think that kind of international action is really important, even if it's not connected to a program of workers' revolution.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's good to show that opposition regardless, and any form of
Dissidence.
Dissidence. That's the word I was looking for. Any form of dissidence is good when it's coming from a perspective that's slightly left of center or left of parliament, even. So
you know, at least against a certain status quo, and I think there's actually an important work that people need to be reading right now. It's actually just an article, not a book, but it's called Fascism by Umberto Eco. And Eco grew up under the Italian fascist, under Mussolini, and he talks about basically a basic blueprint for an eternal fascism. Not that he's advocating for this, but he's sort of trying to tell people how to identify it. You know, what it does. Eternal fascism as opposed to Italian fascism, which is like a very specific fascism, whereas fascism describes the general fascist movement that includes things like Nazism, you know, Spanish Phalangism under Franco.
Well, I think one of the things about fascism is it's always going to take a slightly different form in another country because it is so based on nationalism. And when each country has its different characteristics, different things that it will get behind, naturally the fascism in each country is going to be slightly different to the other.
And we can look at a lot of fascist leaders put on, or at least certain populist fascist leaders, or populist really is part of fascism, but certain fascist leaders will put on this show of being just like everybody else, being the you know, the middle class person. It's just the weird thing about this is that Trump has been able to posture himself in ways that when you look at him, it's just very clear that he's not about that. I mean, you know, he complained about going from a penthouse to a mansion. You know, the most known mansion in the United States, possibly the world.
It is an interesting dynamic because we talk about Trump as a fascist, and I think we'll get into why it's quite clear that he's certainly acting like a fascist. But he hasn't tried to win everyone over like a lot of fascists have. He's not trying to make himself as popular as anything by sort of promising a lot, etc. Or he's just pissing a lot of people off, and it's not in a way that you know,
really
and stuff. They try to inspire people and mobilize the people around themselves. Trump seems to be almost doing the opposite. And you know, you'd see Mussolini, obviously one of the most horrible people to ever walk the earth. But what he'd do is to sort of try and make himself seem popular, as you sort of were alluding to before. Mussolini would get down, and there's footage of him working on a railway or something, trying to.
And Hitler did the same thing. He when he went to some summit of nations, he made a big show of, you know, getting everybody else was basically doing what rich people do, showing off how ostentatious they could make the meal and all that, and he took for himself just this very simple vegetarian meal. Which another thing was his vegetarianism and his environmentalism. Which, when you get down to it, he slaughtered people, so the vegetarian bit is not really holding up as an ethical stance. No, and he mass industrialized Germany, So the environmentalist bit, it's all idealism, whereas the material of it is he's doing the opposite. But Trump is just very honest about what he's doing. He's being upfront about it, but he's putting out so much of this aggression that it's hard to like get through it. You know, it's I don't know.
It's certainly a lot more brazen.
He's keeping his campaign promises, and that's the problem.
That is the thing, and I think one of the lines that you'd see a lot of leftists before the election, before he was elected, and even you'd see you can find footage of Chomsky saying things like this. He'd say, "Well, we don't know how dangerous Trump is because we don't know if he'll do what he says." And I think the general consensus was that he wouldn't be able to do as he says, but it seems
it's week 2, and he's doing it.
Yeah, that's the thing.
He's already started most of it. You know, it's he's not letting it go through the regular government channels. He's as Mulcair up in or Mulcair, I don't know how to say his name ever, but up in Canada, the leader of the National Democratic Party said, you know, he's ruling by decree, and even called it fascist behavior.
Just find that name now so we can.
Here, yeah, I've got it somewhere.
This makes for great listening. Nothing like silence and ums and ahs, but yeah, it certainly is a huge concern. I mean, there's footage of Irish politicians labelling Trump a fascist. I think it's becoming more and more clear that his behaviours aren't your everyday conservative behaviours. I mean, today on my Facebook newsfeed, I saw Ronald Reagan say things that make him look progressive in comparison to Donald Trump. You know,
yeah.
And you know, yeah, go on.
I mean, Ronald Reagan was a piece of shit, but yeah.
No, of course,
oh,
of course, but
sorry, that's just an ingrained reaction. I know you didn't mean to put him up.
Yeah, no, of course, but that's how fucked at the moment is that even today, just today looking through my Facebook feed, it was Ronald Reagan said this about immigration, and you're like, fuck, that makes Donald Trump, you know, seem sorry, that makes Ronald Reagan seem progressive if you compare him to Donald Trump. Clearly, that is not the case.
Yeah, Donald Trump, not a good thing if your liberal counterpart is Reagan.
But yeah, you know you're fucked when you're making Ronald Reagan look progressive. Like that's when you know it's a little bit crazy. And I think that's why Donald Trump isn't your everyday conservative. He's a lot more dangerous, I think, than your everyday conservative.
Yeah. Oh, definitely, and
you know,
it's his disregard for it's his complete disregard for you know, due process, any of that kind of negotiation or anything like that. I mean, like when he says he's a good business negotiator, he means he puts his opponents where they can't say anything otherwise. You know, and I've outlined this before is. Basically, a fascist regime is, you know, like it's a party of abusive husbands, essentially. You know, they.
And we saw the way he treated what's his wife's name, Melania or something. What's his wife's name? I actually don't pay any attention.
Yeah, Melania.
Yeah, Melania. The way he didn't wait, even the behavior.
Yeah, because he doesn't respect her at all.
No, it's clear there's no respect there. There's
his ex-wife accused him of rape and violence against her.
And there's no doubt that
Bannon is on file having hit his wife. That's his chief advisor, and also having abused his kids. You know, it's not like a, you know, haha, look at that. That's terrible. But these are the people we're dealing with. You know?
It's if you look at the way they talk and the way they act themselves, the way they're in office now, it's clear they have. I mean, it's funny us anarchists talking about having no respect for the processes, but it's it's a very different disrespect. It's not.
Yeah. We disrespect the system because we hate what it does to people. We hate, the power that it centralizes. He's disregarding parts of the system because they don't centralize enough power with him. And that's the difference. Is we're thinking of the common good. He's thinking of his own good. And his alone. Oh, sorry, you keep going.
No, yeah, and it's just clearly what's going on now in America is not something we want to occur anywhere else. We don't want it to be something that spreads. It's a big issue, and I think as leftists we really need to mobilise. I think that's what you look at. And I think it's sort of back to the women's marches. If we can mobilise in a way that they did, with a little bit more of a revolutionary face or a anti-Trump agenda that isn't just on one issue. Yeah, and I think we can really make a difference. And I think we are making a difference because a lot of the things that Trump's doing now, the bombing of countries in the Middle East, the ban of refugees, the building the wall. The thing is, they're not unprecedented. Like,
there's already a wall over most of, or not.
Obama deported more people than anyone in the presidents combined in the 20th century. He was bombing countries for fun between 2008 and 2016. And now, instead of those being looked upon, this cool guy just doing his politics, we look at this neo-fascist and go, what you're doing is wrong, and what you're doing is bombing, it's keeping refugees out, it's this, that, and the other. Whereas now those things have become completely unacceptable.
Because he has no charisma is the thing.
He doesn't have the identity that's required to get away with those things.
I call it the either the Obama effect or the Trudeau effect, because they both have that. They have the basically the liberal cult of personality. You can do all of the shit you want, but as long as you're, a pretty boy who smiles to the camera and says, go gay rights every so often, in between talking about how you're going to fund some foreign paramilitary that's like probably going to kill a bunch of gay people because of their extremist ideology, or and I'm not talking about Muslims, I'm actually talking about the KKK. But sorry, no. But and actually, speaking of, the FBI did just recently reveal that many law enforcement agencies, both local and statewide, have been infiltrated by white nationalists deeply. Which is something the left already knew, but it's gotten to the point where the FBI has had to acknowledge that parts of its state, part of the federal state, has been captured by Nazis. It actually now the presidency has too, and it's just an archstone in a fascism that has been building for years.
And the fascism, I mean, Trump, from what I understand, it was a Holocaust Memorial Day, could have been a few days ago, and he was the first president in his address on that day to not mention the genocide of the 6 million Jewish people. I don't think he made any direct reference to it at all.
No, he made no reference to Jewish people whatsoever.
So clearly there's an underlying anti-Semitism there, and in the same breath...
You know why? Because Bannon wrote that speech, and Bannon wrote the refugee... the travel ban, and Bannon plan for them to be released on Holocaust Remembrance Day because he is a white nationalist who used to run Breitbart News.
And in the same breath, they cut the I think there was $227 million that was meant to go into to Palestinians.
Oh yeah,
it could have been billion. I'm not 100%, but it's 227 million or billion. Let's just say million, so I don't exaggerate things. And froze it. And Trump made sure that wouldn't go through, which clearly outlines the correlation between anti-Semitism and Zionism.
Actually, this is deeply part of the new wave of white supremacy. Actually, what Dick BS, Richard B. Spencer, he's part of this whole thing. It's what he calls, and I'm not at all advocating for this to become a regular part of language, but peaceful ethnic cleansing, being where you terrorize people into leaving. And they actually love that there's somewhere for Jewish people to be terrorized into leaving too. Not saying Israel's some kind of conspiracy to get rid of Jewish people in America, but that certain American Zionists are just opportunistic anti-Semites who think that they could end up banishing all Jewish people to Israel. And that's where their support for Israel comes from.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting analysis of that situation. I mean, I've heard Richard Spencer in interviews in the past essentially say, we want America to be like Israel is for Jews, but for whites.
Yeah, they call it a white ethno-state. This is where the identitarian movement is what they're called. They believe that they're essentially they're racial essentialists. So they call themselves racial realists. But funny enough, if you get rid of the real in the middle, it just says racist. But they're essentialists, so they believe that all of our conflicts come from the conflicts between races, which is utterly bullshit, of course, because there's no material basis for that, but they are irrationalist anti-materialists, so they don't care if there's any evidence, they're just going to make up a story.
It's what a lot of right-wing politics in general, or theories is in general. It's all just arguments and stories and
it's narrative.
I mean, just not even anti-fascist, just a classic a capitalist one. When they're trying to talk about something about wage labor theory or some bullshit like that, and they go on about how there's this little story about this guy that really loves this burger, but he's only going to pay $3 for it. This guy that really, really loves this burger, so he's going to pay $5 for it. And that somehow debunks some theory of Marx's that I can't be bothered recalling at this stage.
It's all anecdotal, of course, because they can't. They're once they get to the hard science of things, it's all actually them trying to obfuscate.
It's all bullshit. I mean, firstly, what fucking shop or burger joint do you ever walk into and go, oh yeah, I'm going to pay what's that, like 80% extra? I can't do the math. Just $2 more than what it's
66% extra.
60%. There you go. I said 40 and 80, which is 60% extra than what I need to because I really, really like it. Is that's just not a situation that ever.
And that's not how capitalism works. They have to invent a simulated capitalism. That's all stories and things work out in the end because it's your little storybook fantasy land. You can make things work out however you want. When you pull on your bootstraps, apparently you rise. Honestly, whenever I've pulled on my bootstraps, I've ended up flat on my back.
It's how it works. it's just. And one thing, I recently traveled to America, and one thing that struck me was the fact that everyone believed at some point in their life they will be a millionaire.
Yeah,
and
the lottery does that too. That people look at the lottery and they say one day I'm gonna win it, or I'll just find a ticket or something.
Yeah,
because people have this sort of they everybody feels like they're the exceptional one. Not to say no one's exceptional, unique, or whatever. We can get into the whole Sterner thing where, whatever. But everybody thinks that they're exceptional within the system, and then they'll make it. And that's actually what they've been told their whole lives through all these fantastic narratives. That regular kid who's one day blessed with magic powers and goes on an amazing adventure, and then meets spectacular friends. And really, a lot of us are just waiting for this to happen to us, and it's not going to.
And the thing is, a lot of us, I'd say everyone does have something amazing to offer in the world, but instead of capitalism being used to utilize what everyone can offer, and what the maximum of what everyone can offer, it restricts to a point where you have to have money, you have to know people, you have to have gone to one of the best schools in the nation or whatever, the best universities.
You have to be in position in order to.
And then if you have the natural intelligence, you'll make it. Obviously, they don't tell a lot of that story, but everyone does have something to offer.
Well, even look at Trump.
But the system today obviously restricts that to a point where not everyone can utilize what they have, and the irony and the tragedy of it is that capitalism states that they will. Everyone's special, just not everyone is there to make profits off of the labor of the working class. And I don't.
If you think about it too, these rich people don't do anything without a huge labor force invisibly doing it for them. They make decisions, but then a huge amount of people do the thing for them. I don't have that. I can't give orders to half a dozen people, tell them to do my thinking for me. It's not that they're smarter. They have one person talking in their ear through some kind of, device. They use those earpieces. And they have, I mean, like during speeches and stuff when they're giving presentations and such. And then they have advisors upon advisors. They have at their disposal so much human resource that most of it's not allowed to self-direct. So it seems as if these are exceptional people, but they're not. There's no real difference between Steve Jobs and some other schmuck in a turtleneck, except that Steve Jobs was ruthless enough to get other people working for him. And
I was about to mention Steve Jobs actually, because there's a story that goes around about Steve Jobs and his ingenuity and how he woke up the night before the first iPhone was unveiled and had this revelation that the cover, the screen had to be glass, or it had to be. There was no way it couldn't be. It couldn't be revealed if he wasn't. So this great innovative man called up one of his guys who called up the factory in China, the Foxconn factory in China, where all the workers live.
And there are now nets between the buildings so they can't kill themselves.
Yeah, that's the one. And he woke all those people up who work for 12 hours a day in the most atrocious conditions, some of the most atrocious conditions in the world, for a measly wage. Woke them up, which is some of the only free time they get to themselves, if you want to call sleeping free time. He disrupted that. Thousands of workers, got them up. I think they got a tea and a biscuit, I think is what, if I remember the story correctly, the most they got. And they woke up.
For our American listeners, that's...
Steve Jobs has the profits for it. And they're still in that factory with their friends who've committed suicide around them.
Yeah.
I can't imagine there's any prospects there, and that's their lives, just a literal cog in the machine. And that
Jobs can wake up in the middle of the night and disrupt thousands of lives because he had an idea. Because he had
genius. He's a genius. It's complete. That's the thing. That's their justification, that he's a genius, that he's this, that, etc. And it's all bullshit, really. And one of the shames about Trump,
it's the same thing Edison did, actually, is that Edison had dozens of people working for him, and he stole all of their ideas, including Tesla.
What
were you saying about Trump? Sorry.
Capitalism doesn't drive initiative or whatever you want to call it, or ingenuity. I think it just gives credit to a certain person in a certain position, and that's how that sort of develops. But to bring it back to Trump, one of the shames of the left about Trump is that he's so far right that he's made that the discussions have become, oh yes, Jewish people are in fact people. We can confirm, like, we don't have, like, and we're talking about, yes, people are allowed to flee a place where they're getting bombed. And
yes, people are allowed to run away from danger.
these would be things that a child would never be able, like, it would be like when you grow up and you're for me anyways, growing up in the community that I did, I didn't know what racism was until someone told me what racism was, and then I was like, oh, you mean you judge people? Oh, I didn't know you did that. It would be like, oh, you mean there's a reason why this person who has this culture behind them isn't a human? I never ever would have thought about that in my life. Oh, you mean that person that is running away from literal death, that's wrong, and they're not allowed to come to a safe place. Yeah. It's just the most unnatural, fabricated bullshit.
It really does take education. It takes 12 plus years of educating people to think that way. That's what our public schools do, and the same with any private school as well. Schooling under capitalism teaches us to disregard certain people, and which people should be disregarded too.
Yeah, completely.
And I wanted to bring up again that article, Fascism. It gives a good list. I've seen 14 points of fascism going around. I don't know about exactly how accurate that is, because some of it just describes everyday life under really shitty liberalism. But here is a list given by Umberto Eco, which is adapted by myself into a bullet list rather than because he does paragraph explanations. But I think this gets it down. The cult of tradition, the rejection of modernism, or otherwise known as irrationalism. So, we can come back to that. The cult of action for action's sake, disagreement seen as treason, fear of difference, as in both different people and being outlined as someone who is different. Appealed to a frustrated middle class, obsession with a plot leading to us versus them thinking, encouraging the fear of humiliation, and you can see that among the alt-right and their favorite insult, cuck, being about their funny enough. I'll again get back to that. Encouraging fear of humiliation, pacifism as treason, life as permanent warfare, contempt for the weak or popular elitism, which go hand in hand. The cult of death and heroism, you can see that in all the military worship. Machismo, so locker room talk. Selective populism, as in certain Americans aren't American. He's for the American people so long as they're white.
Yeah.
And the impoverishment of language, otherwise known as newspeak.
Yeah, and I mean, the frightening thing about all of that is everything there on that list. You can think of an example of Trump.
The obsession with the plot. He's even advocated for the New World Order plot, the conspiracy theory, in coded language, when he talked about how global bankers were controlling the United States.
There's it's becoming clearer every day that Trump's in office that he's more than just a harsh conservative. He is a fascist that is obviously causing a divide, not only in the States but across Australia. I mean, there are
across the world.
Across the world. Sorry, I didn't mean to say across Australia. I was just thinking here.
Yeah, no, I wasn't correcting you. I was adding on. Because what you said is obviously true.
It's everywhere, and there's
Germany, where the far right has been shamed into underground existence for the longest time, is it was the last in the EU to get a really powerful fascist presence, but they're back, and same in Italy.
Yeah, right.
It's
So yeah, I think it's a challenge to the left now, but I think.
Oh, I say sign up to your local IWW, ISO. I really don't care at this point if they're fighting Trump, and they're fighting fascism. Sign on. But once again, my recommendation is the IWW.
I think some an issue to the left was we are sectarian. I think a time here, especially for people who, I mean, Marxists and anarchists, there's generally a lot of there tends to be disagreement between the two, but I think there's enough similarities there that we can really all bond together to fight against this. You mentioned before, you said our liberal friends. Clearly, there's a lot of disagreement there, but
yeah. More and more people are seeing violence against Nazis as being an okay thing, and that's good.
And I think that's an attitude that's changed, because not too long ago, the mainstream media, it was all
the common thought. Well, but I've seen this growing for a while, actually, through editing LeftPress. People actually really like stories about Antifa. It
for sure.
It gets people's attention, and people, they like having someone to cheer for too, because the whole time we're trying to look for heroes among all of these honestly unscrupuled, immoral people, because to get into this kind of spotlight of having political power, economic, or whatever power, possibly other than artistic power, and even that's reined in by all these companies that have people under strict contracts, so they can't really say much. But basically, to get into that kind of spotlight takes a really nasty person. And so you just have a gradient of nasty people to choose from to be who's going to fight for us? Is it going to be, person I least disagree with, or person with most power to fight my enemies?
It's classic lesser evilism, I suppose.
Yeah. When we're the people fighting, we can cheer for ourselves without, feeling like we have to give something up. Even with Sanders, it was he has a very economic nationalism.
For sure. Yeah, no, he
doesn't really I don't know if he cares about the middle class, or not the middle class, the working class internationally, but his policies were only ever going to help the American working class, and honestly at the expense of various other contingencies of the working class. You know, it's still divisive, and taking advantage of and exploiting our peers, which isn't exactly our fault, because, you know, we have to work for someone, and it's our bosses mostly who are doing the exploitation. But, you know, we should always be doing whatever we can to stand in solidarity with fellow workers, and not put our own individual needs, or sectional, you know, national needs ahead of everyone else, because it does lead to this situation of fascism. You know, if my nation's not, it becomes a competition. You know, the working class of our nation needs our nation to do well, or else we'll stop doing as well, and some other working class will be doing better. And this is how nationalism, this is how they get us divided against each other. You know, this is the point of borders, you know, is to lock us up in various minimum security prisons. Well, that's all the time we have for today. This has been LeftOut, a production of LeftPress. You can find links to Fascism by Umberto Eco in our description, and links to our blogs as well as LeftPress. And today's featured song was The First Time I Saw Her by Gris Effects.
All right, fantastic. Thank you.
Peace.